Hi everyone, and welcome to my video log 3 on skills versus capacities. So the aim of this video log is to give two examples of athletes executing a suboptimal performance of an exercise, in this case the A-skip, and to identify whether this is due to a lack of skill or a lack of capacity. So the A-skip is one of several exercises that mimic sprinting mechanics and coordination in a segmented form. When practiced, these can help improve sprint technique. Each exercise can be trained in isolation, but literature suggests that effective transfer relies on a whole-part-whole approach. And as you can see, these have numerous progressions that range from low to high speed. So I've borrowed this video from the Nike Training Club YouTube channel just to show an elite sprinter executing a pretty flawless technical model of the A-skip, and also to show the main teaching cues. These are to maintain a tall neutral trunk with the eyes fixed firmly ahead, relax quadriceps and hamstrings to allow the hip flexors to aggressively contract and drive the high knee, dorsiflex the ankle of the swing leg, which serves to shorten the lever and also pre-activate the anterior tibialis and gastrocnemius in preparation for ground contact. And finally, making sure foot contact occurs at the mid to front foot directly beneath the hip or behind the centre of mass, which prevents excessive deceleration and aids push-off. Now I'll present two athletes who perform a suboptimal execution of the A-skip, and I will notate my analysis using green icons to represent desirable actions and red icons to represent undesirable actions. Okay, on this still image of the swing phase, the athlete on the right presents with a tall neutral trunk and good unrestricted hip flexion. However, there is a very noticeable lack of dorsiflexion at the ankles, which causes excessive knee flexion to compensate for the longer lever. Compare this to the athlete on the left, who presents with forward trunk lean and quite a kyphotic posture. The athlete also has excessive knee flexion, but despite this manages pretty good dorsiflexion of the ankle, which may suggest some incapacities with hip flexion. As the athletes move into the stance phase, you will see how these undesirable actions that were shown in the swing phase have a knock-on effect. Here you'll see the athlete on the right maintains a tall neutral posture compared to a more pronounced forward trunk lean shown with the athlete on the left. So as the athletes move through into the next stance phase, you'll see that the athlete on the left is striking with the heel instead of the mid to forefoot, and as a result he is overreaching, making ground contact quite a way ahead of directly under the hip or behind the centre of mass. And this is now going to cause the athlete to decelerate. Compare this to the athlete on the right who strikes with the mid to forefoot and almost under the hip. By doing so, she is able to translate force behind her centre of mass and facilitate acceleration horizontally. Also notice that the athlete on the left is looking down, whereas the athlete on the right is looking straight ahead. So here I have regressed the A-skip to an A-march, which is a lower speed derivative of the skill. This will help me to identify whether the athlete's inability to complete the A-skip optimally is due to a lack of skill or a lack of capacity. So starting with this still image, if we focus on the athlete on the right, you can see that the lower speed march and a verbal cue to point the toe to the knee has eradicated the lack of ankle dorsiflexion that was exhibited with the A-skip shown previously. This ability to dorsiflex the ankle during a lower speed drill rules out any physical incapacities such as a lack of strength or mobility that might have prevented ankle dorsiflexion. This suggests that the high speed nature of the A-skip is a motor skill that the athlete has either previously learned incorrectly or has never learned at all, and this concludes that the athlete therefore exhibits a lack of skill. And here is an example of the athlete practicing the movement against the wall in what is quite a close skill. Firstly on the left, she is performing it at a low speed, progressing this to a faster speed, which reinforces the transfer of learning the motor skill at low to high speed. So if we return to the still image of the A-march, we can compare this lack of skill to the athlete on the left, who even with the lower speed march is still presenting with forward trunk lean. This is exacerbated as the athlete attempts to flex the hip and exhibits a pronounced dip of the chest to compensate for not achieving adequate hip flexion. It is clear that in this case some physical incapacity or even incapacities, be it a lack of sufficient strength or mobility, are causing this compensatory mechanism and preventing an optimal performance of the movement. So here I've used the functional movement screen hurdle step test as a means to observe the athlete's stability and mobility. From a sagittal perspective, you can see the athlete abduct the hip when being challenged to go into unilateral hip flexion. This flags up yet another compensatory mechanism for restricted hip flexion and concludes a lack of capacity is the main contributor for suboptimal performance of the A-skip. By comparing and contrasting these two athletes, I hope to have clearly illustrated the differences between skills and capacities in suboptimal performance of a given movement. I also hope to have shown the importance for S&C coaches to identify this and how this process can be aided through simple regression of movements or adoption of movement screening tools. Once identified, informed decisions for effective athlete programming can be implemented to improve the technical model of a movement and in doing so reduce the risk of injury and optimize performance.